Hi there, and welcome back to Naturally Recovering Autism. I am your host, Karen Thomas, and we are here to share with you natural resources for children on the autism spectrum and their parents to give you help on your journey, and especially the natural resources that we are able to share with you. As you may know, I did recover my own son from his symptoms of autism using all natural resources. So I really like to share as many of those resources as I can with other parents. And I am lucky, and we are all very fortunate that I have experts that come and help us in interviews here so they can share their knowledge with us, and you can learn so many more important aspects that can help you get your child better. Today, we are going to be discussing Lyme disease and its combination with the connection it has to parasites. And this is a really important issue because these comorbid or side symptoms that these kids have are often the reasons that they're not getting better. And so you need to know about them, and also we want to know what natural resources are available to be able to use with these kids, so that we're not always having to put more antibiotics in them, because that's a big part of the problem. So what are the resources? What can you do? Also, there is a persistence with the Lyme and the parasites that we're going to discuss today, and that has a lot to do with the mold biotoxin illness. And this is something I wrote about in my book, Naturally Recovering Autism, and I have done a couple interviews in the past that specialize in that topic that I will link to. So anything we discuss in this interview, I will link to at the bottom of this page at naturallyrecoveringautism.com, where it is released, because there are going to be some really important, there's a lot of important information for you that I want to make sure that you're able to find once this is over. Today, our very special guest, I have interviewed Dr. Jodie Dashore before, and she is one of the interviews that I'll be linking to, where we get really more in depth on some of the mold issues. But we are going to talk about that today in its combination with being the persistent aspect that can prevent children from getting better if they have the Lyme and parasitic issue, which we're finding, I think, and you can correct me, Dr. Dashore, but I believe they're finding in at least 80% of these kids, the tests are coming out positive, but they say it's really 100% of these kids for the most part that are having these issues. And we can talk about that further. A lot of the tests don't always come out positive, even when they are positive for Lyme and parasites. Right. So we can go into that a little bit too. My guest today again is Dr. Jodie Dashore. Dr. Dashore is an internationally recognized pioneering clinician in the all-natural and plant-based treatment of autism, Lyme disease, mold biotoxin illness, PANS and PANDAS, which is streptococcal infections, and nutrigenomics and autoimmune illness. She works with children and adults in over 27 countries around the world. Dr. Dashore is a board-certified doctor of occupational therapy, neurology, with a postdoctoral specialization in neurosensory. She is board-certified as a holistic health practitioner and board-certified in integrative pediatrics. Her past training abroad includes specialization in pediatric neurology and multiple naturopathic disciplines in Bombay, the UK, and the United States. Dr. Dashore is currently pursuing her PhD and board certification in integrative medicine with a special interest in quantum physics. Dr. Jodie is the founder and director of BioNexus Health Clinic in Marlborough, New Jersey, and her center is dedicated to plant-based and all-natural treatment methods, which is very, very exciting for all of us. So welcome, Dr. Dashore, and thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure as always.
So I think we should jump right in. There's so much to talk about. The parasitic issues with Lyme, how we can look into that, like address what it is that is, keeping these kids from getting better, and why these things are so hidden and how they're so hard to treat. And then also, what are some solutions around that? So why don't we just basically jump into that, because I know you also have some alternative protocols to offer, which is really exciting for all of us as parents with these children.
Thank you. Yes, it has been quite a well-known fact that Lyme disease can be very persistent. The persistence and the pathogenicity of Borrelia has been researched very well by Dr. Alan McDonald, and one of the things that has come to the forefront is that the Borrelia bacteria can exist as what we call as endosymbionts within nematodes, worms, other kinds of parasites. And it becomes very hard for any blood test or any other body fluid test to show us the existence of Borrelia. And often I get patients that have been treated for years, and the lab tests are coming back negative, or the labs are coming back as inconclusive, and they still have symptoms. They still have symptoms of infection. We will speak about the infection and inflammation connection, kind of, infection, inflammation kind of feeds off of each other, but the persistence and pathogenicity, as I mentioned earlier, of Lyme disease is very frustrating. It is draining, excuse me, it drains resources, it drains energy. It is, many patients end up with a broken spirit, especially if it is a little child on the spectrum that is comorbid with Lyme. Karen, do you know that, I'm sure you know, that Lyme exists in, I'm sorry, I'm having some throat issues.
It's okay. Go ahead, have a sip of water if you need there.
Yeah. Oh, pardon me. So there are multiple life forms of Borrelia. And Borrelia burgdorferi is the most widely studied strain. There is the L form, there is the very well-known spirochete, then there is the encysted form, there is the cyst form that a lot of conventional and herbal protocols go into the phase of cyst busting, which means that, we are trying to get rid of Borrelia that is encysted at that point. And then it also exists as blebs and vesicles. What happens is it's important to look at additional mechanisms other than working as an endosymbiont or hiding inside parasites. And by the way, there is some research ongoing, and there is theoretical evidence that co-infections may also persist in this manner. But we are going to focus on Borrelia, and some of the mechanisms that have been well looked into is, to fight, to flee, or hide are pretty much the imperatives of long-term survival by most infectious microbes. Stephen Buhner talks about microbial intelligence, microbial, right, intracellular microbial communication, they send messages, etc. So the main mechanisms of immune evasion would be active immune suppression. Then there is immune evasion, or what is also known as induction of immune tolerance. This involves looking at immune complexes. One thing that I learned when I was studying with Dr. Charles Ray Jones was one of the lab tests that he would always measure is immune complexes. Then there is also the other mechanism of physical seclusion. They hide intracellularly, right? So they also hide inside the immune privileged sites.
Which is why a lot of the times that somebody will be tested for Lyme and parasites, but they won't show up in those tests, even though they're positive, because they hide so well.
That is correct. Yes. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have tests that have been run, multisystemically, research-wise. Borrelia has been isolated from, let's see, synovial fluid, skin, cerebrospinal fluid, that would be the brain, brain tissue, blood, muscle, lymphatic tissues, heart, kidney, and splenic tissues. So it is truly a multi-system infection.
And so if somebody tests and it comes up negative, should they still go ahead and treat it with a natural protocol because they're not going to do any harm? What do you do with that when it doesn't come up but you sense that it's there because the symptoms are there?
Correct. Lyme disease is technically speaking a clinical diagnosis, and most of the amazing Lyme literate physicians we have out there, I would say all of the Lyme literate physicians we have out there understand this. And using lab tests is usually an adjunct. Sometimes, for insurance purposes, we need a clear-cut lab diagnosis of Lyme disease. And then even more than that, most of the time that I see, it is the patient that needs that reassurance that I'm allocating so many resources to my treatment, that do I really have Lyme? It does help when patients understand the mechanism of immune suppression, immune evasion, and even if I explain it in very lay terms, when it comes to children, I find that mothers of autistic children and fathers, of course, let's not forget the dads. They are so well researched. Sometimes they know a whole lot more than the pediatricians, as I'm sure you've experienced the same as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
During your journey. So, I remember spending hundreds of hours researching online, in books, in medical journals, wherever I could find any information, try to tease out those rare and hard to understand connections. And so it is usually a smooth process explaining to the families of children on the spectrum that it is important to look upon it as a clinical diagnosis. We do a neurological evaluation. We look at different systems of the body. And once I present, look, these are the things going on, we have some indicators. Sometimes what happens, Karen, on the Western blot, right? Even when the Western blot is done through the regular labs, there are some bands that show up as positive.
And for those of you listening who aren't familiar, the Western blot is a traditional blood test that is done to detect Lyme's disease. And often we will find that that the test, it does not come up positive even when somebody is positive for Lyme. Yes,
that's true. So when we do the Western blot, perhaps I don't know if you already have done, perhaps one of the lectures could be about just about Lyme testing, because there are so many different options. And now there are some families that are sending their tests abroad, just trying to find some sort of positive, some sort of a lab positive result is what they're trying to find, which as we just said, is hard to come by, because autistic children, according to research that has been done over the last couple of decades, that there is a lot of immune involvement, right? There is a lot of immune suppression, immune dysregulation to begin with as a population, with children on the spectrum. And then you add to that a comorbid infection and immune evasive and suppressive bacteria like Borrelia, as well as co-infections that can be immune suppressing as well. And then you bring into the picture parasites. Then we have something that is very difficult to detect in the labs. There are other parameters that go off track. We do look at the white blood cells. We look at the eosinophils. We look at the absolute eosinophils, the neutrophils. We look at liver enzymes. There are other markers that can help us. But to make a long story short, the question you asked was, do patients choose to start natural treatment? And I would like to say yes. In my practice, absolutely. Once we've had a very transparent, very detailed discussion with the family, even those who tend to be left brain, evidence-based, do understand what I'm speaking about, mostly because they're already prior researched. And we do start natural protocols right away. Yeah, we do.
And that the whole family should always be treated as well, because I know that Lyme can be passed in utero. And some people think, well, I don't ever remember being bitten by a tick. Well, they may have been, but didn't know it, because the ticks can be as small as a poppy seed. Then or smaller actually. And then horseflies, mosquitoes, various other things, lice, head lice. Also transfers it. And, kids get that in school. So, there are a lot of things out there that, are affecting our systems that we're not really maybe remembering. But that's why when mom may have passed it in utero, then if one of us has it, we pass saliva, we share food, if we kiss on the lips, things like that, we're passing those germs back and forth. In fact, I'm talking with a biosystemic dentist now who I'm going to be interviewing soon, and he's talking about how the cavitations where these kids have so many cavities, right? And so one of the minerals are just being pulled by a lot of these parasites and other things as well. So their teeth are depleted. There are cavitations, little pockets where these parasites and Lyme hold in there, and they can't, any treatment can't sometimes get in there until it's actually opened up and treated that way as well. And their intelligence with this, there's a biofilm that they create that really has to be broken down too, because it's so strong. And on YouTube, there's some great visual pictures of showing how biofilm and the intelligence of different bacteria work together to create this strong, almost cement-like foundation around themselves so that they can't be penetrated by antibiotics and things like that too. So those treatments don't always work. What have you found? I know you've been doing a lot of research in herbal remedies, and I'm going to mention now, and we're definitely going to link to it and talk much more about it closer to the end of the show, but Dr. Dashore has a retreat coming up August 3rd through 5th of 2018, and it is for parents and practitioners, and it's going to be in North Carolina, and it will be her showing and teaching a lot of these herbal protocols to people who want to learn them. And it's a retreat as well, so it looks like a wonderful space up in the mountains in Boone. But that retreat will be available to people as well coming up. But what have you found that also you have found that works, but that you can also show parents how to do even on their own?
With regards to Lyme disease and parasites, is that what we will be addressing first? Or what we should do, Karen, and correct me if I'm wrong, shall we briefly look at Lyme and mold connection as being another reason for persistence of Lyme disease, as well as intestinal parasites due to the gut inflammation that is perpetuated by biotoxins? And then
absolutely. I mean, these things, they all go together. So it's not just parasites or just Lyme or just mold. They all contribute to preventing recovery from autism. So they all really need to be addressed. And then we need to make sure that we're not passing things back and forth. And then, as we talked about mold, that you make sure that your buildings and the environment that you're in are safe as well, so that you're not continuing that ongoing inflammation. But why don't we'll try to stay on track here. I know we both have so much going on in our minds that we want to share. Let you just go with it. You kind of just take them down the road.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, I'll do that. So you mentioned about dental issues that are seen in children on the spectrum, and I shall talk about the dental issues. I agree with the Borrelia connection, with the jaw cavitations connection. I also agree with one of the immune evasion mechanisms, of course, is biofilms. But what I'm going to highlight a little bit more is about a missing link, which is not so much missing anymore as people are getting more and more aware, is the MARCONS connection. The MARCONS are the multiple antibiotic resistance coagulase negative staph bacteria that are found in water damaged buildings that I believe we have spoken about in the previous interview, and I know you're going to be sending a link to that. So I'll just mention them briefly. So MARCONS and the dental connection, MARCONS and the strong biofilm connection, so much so that, you know, I have a patient in South Africa, and this is very recent, and it's not uncommon, but I'm mentioning this because this just happened a couple of days ago. Extremely strong MARCONS, large amount, resistant to like 9 antibiotics, and she's only 18 years old. Clearly, yeah, has gone, you know, misdiagnosed for many years as chronic fatigue. Recent CT scan shows sinuses as clear. Like, that is so impossible because the recent microbiology labs clearly has given us information about the MARCONS. But as you can see, you know, the biofilm goes completely undetected even on a CT scan. One last thing before I go on to you know, biotoxins and the natural protocols is one thing that I am beginning to collect data on, and I'm seeing a lot of trend that nobody has looked at so far at all, is you know, and what reminded me of that was, Karen, that you mentioned the in utero transfer of Lyme disease, parasites, often co-infections, viruses. Now, and of course, there's plenty of research studies done on in utero transfer of Borrelia and Lyme disease. This is what happened to my family as well. But, you know, I'm looking at the environmental toxins and biotoxin exposure during pregnancy and its effect on the child and the connection. So there are connections. You know, right now, some of them are pretty obvious connections. Some of them are you know, still gossamer a little bit. I'm trying to tease those out, but definitely a picture is emerging. So this data, once I have a little bit more broad spectrum information, I will be presenting that perhaps at Autism One, or, you know, write up an article, another one for Autism File. We'll see. So coming back to biotoxins, right? We know that biotoxins cause a multi-system and a multi-symptom illness, and underlying biotoxins and biotoxin illness or chronic inflammatory response syndrome, when that is comorbid, when that is underlying, it often goes missed. That is why I keep saying underlying. To autism and Lyme is one of the reasons why children don't get better in spite of being treated for Lyme. I have some children whose poor desperate parents will even try conventional protocols. You know, they even try antibiotics. They're like, all right, we will do extra probiotics. We'll try to fix the gut, support the gut, etc. Many of them are seeing GI specialists. Many of them have their children on products, I should say pharmaceuticals, like Enterocod and Pentasa, and that is still not helping to control the GI inflammation. And luckily, there's more and more awareness that it could be underlying biotoxin illness. So that is the underlying inflammation that is somehow not allowing the infection to be eradicated. Eradicated as in put in remission. There's no eradication from Borrelia, but we can certainly put it in remission. You're probably aware of this fact, and I'm sure you've educated your listeners that Lyme disease can only be put in remission, and any kind of physical or emotional stress can usually bring that back up to the surface, and people can experience a flare, just like very similar to a cold sore.
Right, and I'm starting to work even with emotion code pieces that are releasing old traumatic trapped emotions that can be causing internal stress for people that they're not even aware of, because it's just like well, I'm a craniosacral therapist as background. And some people think, well, don't you have to be hit in the head to have your cranial bones altered? And I'm like, no, you do not. Physical or emotional impact. Emotional trauma can affect, as we know, things just as much as even genetics. All of those things are affected by physical or emotional. So yeah, if the body is stressed for any reason, it's weaker, and then things can break. So yeah, that's definitely something to be addressed.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So we were looking at parasites. Many children come to me having already been through the pharmaceutical treatment of parasites. Doesn't work, parasites keep coming back. We shall, I'll speak a little bit about the parasite piece, and then we'll go on to the herbs and other natural methods that I use in my practice. And the most exciting one is, Karen, plant stem cells. I'm so excited about that. So,
oh yeah. So tell us about that.
yes. So parasites. I wanted to briefly touch base on the various scenarios that I'm seeing with persistent parasites, and a few things that have been very helpful. One thing is, often there are combination treatment protocols that need to be used, like and any good Lyme literate therapist or Lyme literate not therapist, Lyme literate clinician, MD, ND, whoever is treating the patient at that point will be aware that it's because this is such a complex situation. Combination protocols work, and some of the key combination protocols are when you are treating for heavy metals, it is important to have binders on board for yeast. It is important to have not just binders for yeast toxins, it is also important to have anti-yeast herbs. And I'm going to say herbs because that's what I use in my practice, but an anti-yeast protocol in place when you're trying to treat heavy metals, because the body will secrete yeast in an attempt to try to bind excessive heavy metals. And so both have to be treated together if we are looking to see a good remission there, or a good resolution of the heavy metals. The same applies for yeast. When sometimes during testing, yeast comes up, not sometimes, very often, yeast comes up as quite persistent, very high, and one needs to be sure that while we are going after the yeast, it is important to have binders on board for heavy metals. Sometimes parasites come into play. So when we are treating parasites, it's important to have antimicrobials on board to treat co-infections and Lyme disease. And I also like to relate back to the Western blot. For example, if band 41 shows up, or if there is band 39, if there's band 39, I know that there is some, there is a strong susceptibility towards autoimmune issues. If there aren't autoimmune issues already, if there's band 41, in my practice, what I'm seeing is usually there are underlying mycoplasmas, there's underlying bacteria, there's underlying parasites. I often find a lot of underlying viruses like Epstein-Barr, cytomegalo, HHV6, human parvo, sometimes toxo. I remember toxo because just yesterday I had a 7-year-old whose toxo came up positive. 7-year-old from Ukraine, actually. So these are all complexes, right? Complex microbial pictures and complex treatment patterns that come into play. So as long as we are aware, as long as your practitioner is aware that these things go hand in hand and has protocols to either bind or to eliminate as needed, then these treatments go along really well. So as you can see, it won't matter if you've been treated with pharmaceuticals. I remember with my son, you know, we did round upon round of pharmaceutical treatment for parasites. We don't need to go into the names. Those are the commonly used treatment for parasites, and it simply would not work. Now, the one thing that worked, other than making sure that yeast and heavy metals, Lyme and co-infections were all taken care of while treating the parasites. Even if we are doing 2 drops of the antimicrobial herbs, 2 drops of the nootropic herbs, and I'm going to be discussing the various classes of herbs that I use in my practice. But you know, even if, as long as we have a little bit of herbs on board, the treatment really went swimmingly well. Where was I? So we were with the parasites. The one big piece was diet. Specific carbohydrate diet was very important in starving the yeast and the bacteria. Now, my son was diagnosed as failure to thrive. He was 80 pounds soaking wet, and you know, almost 12 years old at that time. And it was very with a lot of trepidation that I did the specific carbohydrate diet. It worked, but we had further weight loss. And then after the SCD, once the parasites once they stopped becoming visible in stool, you know, we would you know, Karen, it was the strangest thing, because we were able to recover my son from you know, to becoming neurotypical by the time he was 9 or 10 years old. So he was very aware of his body, because it was almost like, you know, a newly recovered brain, right? Mm-hmm. So what he would say to me every day after dinner was, and you know, in hindsight, I found out that dinner was like so completely SCD illegal back in the day. So after dinner, he would be like, "Mom, I have to go to the bathroom. It's coming, it's coming." And you know what he would do? He would pass one worm.
Maybe every night after dinner.
Every night after dinner. 1 or 2 worms, and that is all that would come. You know, some biofilm and a worm that would come out. So you know that when you see 1 or 2, there is
a lot more.
Thousands, millions, who knows how many in the intestine. Yes, yeah, we would see biofilm and a worm pop out after dinner. It was very, and keep in mind, we had done multiple rounds of pharmaceuticals for antiparasitics.
Wow. Yeah, and it's still, I mean, you put your body through all of that, you know, because we hear that that's what you're supposed to do, or the only way that you can treat it. And then these antibiotics, as parents have found, they're like, "Oh, well, I had my child on antibiotics and they got better while they were on them." What's happening is you're at the time, you're killing all of the good and all of the bad, but the good is getting killed with it. So then after they get off of those antibiotics, they'll slowly get worse and end up being usually worse than they were before they started those antibiotics, because they have now destroyed what might have been left of any good bacteria in their gut. And you're starting the groundwork at the very ground, you know, and you have to rebuild all of that back up. And as Dr. Dashore mentioned, that, you know, any, you know, processed carbohydrates of any kind, it's not just gluten and dairy. It's much more than that needs to be eliminated, so that these organisms cannot use them as food. Another thing you might find is that your child may even be eating some healthy foods, but their body's not actually able to absorb a lot of the nutrition due to issues like leaky gut, but also because these parasites are absorbing and taking that nutrition from you, or from them.
That's very true. I you know, absolutely agree, and I would encourage parents to kind of, you know, listen to what you just said, you know, a couple times, to kind of grasp the concept of that. The absorption brings us back to biotoxin illness, because melanocyte stimulating hormone, vasoactive intestinal peptide, these are not only anti-inflammatory and immune regulatory for the body. One is a hormone, one is a peptide, but they are also very important for absorption of nutrients in the gut. You mentioned the specific carbohydrate diet, you mentioned pharmaceuticals. So pharmaceuticals we spoke about, and we don't really need to go a whole lot into, so I won't. But with the specific carbohydrate diet, I managed to stick to it like for 3 to 4 months. But I do see children in my practice that are not gaining weight. You know, that just like my son have a diagnosis or almost have a diagnosis of failure to thrive. So a couple of the SCD practitioners that I met along the way introduced me to the concept that modifying the SCD diet would be acceptable if medically necessary. And certainly, you know, I've been finding this to be medically very necessary for many of my patients. And so I've kind of learned to look at the inflammatory markers. I mean, obviously, the clinician needs to understand the SCD connection with the gut and what the SCD diet is doing, the various components of the diet. And so in other words, you know, physiology and biochemistry of the gut becomes very important. And what I'm finding is looking at a child's methylation, looking at the SNPs present, then looking at the inflammatory markers and the biotoxin markers that are present, looking at organic acids test, and you know, a few other things, a few other tools that I have in my practice and in my toolbox. Based upon that, I can individually modify the SCD diet to include some illegal foods, but that are modified in such a way that they are not feeding the microbes anymore.
So I'm sure our parents are very curious. What can you give us an example of a modification that is acceptable and why you would choose it for some kids? I know with these markers, you need to know, okay, do they have methylation issues? Because that might tell you that some foods are better for them and not better for them. But so can you give us an example of what you might do as a slight modification for a diet?
Sure, I'll give you one example. I see, you know, a lot of families from abroad. Many of the families from the Middle East, from Southeast Asia, from East. Rice and lentils are a staple.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that even Dr. Shoemaker's research speaks about is that melanocyte stimulating hormone and vasoactive intestinal peptide are not always low in children per se, you know, in children with CIRS, or chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And then once these children have been treated for parasites with the strict SCD and my herbal protocols, etc., and then I see that the VIP and MSH seems okay. And then I also see that I don't. Okay, I'll just mention that here because I'm thought I might go into a little bit more detail a bit later, but I'll mention it here. So for children that don't have a SNP in MTHFR A1298, A1298 has a stronger connection to neurotransmitters versus the folate issues with MTHFR C677. So once I see that children are falling into this category, okay, let me recap again. VIP, MSH, low inflammatory markers, right? The TGF-beta-1 isn't off the charts, isn't 12,000, you know, some children end up with 21,000. And I see that we have completed the yeast and parasite protocols. The one thing that I am able to add is rice.
Mm.
And
at the end, though, because you have to starve the candida out first, right?
Correct. So this would be like about 2 to 3 months into the pure SCD diet. And you know what? Parents love the SCD diet. It's hard. Sometimes they need guidance. I do offer guidance, you know, 15-minute consultations once a week. We look at some diet ideas, how to, because, children on the spectrum can be such picky eaters too, but coming back to the modification. So I forget his first name, but there was a wonderful immunologist, Pierre Lourdin. I'm not even sure of his designation, but he speaks wonderfully. I know he is a holistic clinician. He speaks wonderfully about the leaky gut and zonulin-occludin connection, and he speaks about biofilms. He speaks about lectin and inflammation. So when we soak white rice or brown rice for 24 hours, and we make sure that before cooking, it gets rinsed out really well. It gets rinsed out till the water runs clear, and then we cook it. And one word of warning, cooking, always organic, non-GMO, white rice after 24 hours soak. Don't expect to literally see sprouts coming out. That's not adequate time. But what happens is the rice seed itself becomes enzymatically enriched in preparation for growth or sprouting, because that's the message that the seed gets when it's in water, that it's about to sprout. So that more or less gives us enzymes that digest that rice, meaning the rice itself is producing the enzymes that are helping us digest that rice, as well as the lectin factor is greatly reduced. Okay, so that connection to inflammation and molecular mimicry with gluten, that is more or less eliminated. What I was saying was, one word of caution would be to, you're going to need less amount of water and a far shorter cooking period if you're cooking with sprouted rice, or you won't end up with rice, you'll end up with risotto. So. Right.
I also want to mention to people to make sure you're not using aluminum pans. You don't want to be cooking, like an aluminum. Many of those rice cookers are aluminum that people are using. So beware of that. Aluminum is a toxic heavy metal, so you don't want it in your food. Yes, pressure cooking kills all the nutrients. See, that gives me, another aha moment is that. That gave me another aha moment in the past was, I started looking at what pots and pans to use, ceramic, Alterna, etc. I'm not endorsing any brand, by the way. It's just that this is some of the research that I did. What I found was here in the United States, and my Indian and my Greek culture are both quite familiar with using clay pots and pans from clay. So I was able to find those in the United States, handmade, beautiful, from black clay, non-toxic. There's nothing in there, and that's what I use at home in my cooking. But yes, yeah. Okay, I have some ceramic cookware that I found that I like that's non-toxic. I can link to that too. But what is do you know the website offhand that you get that from? I can send that to you. Okay. Yeah, that would be great. I'm sure parents would love to have that resource. So we'll link to that as well in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, remind me. I'll send that to you. It's beautiful black clay pots. I think Amazon has it, as well as from the website itself. It's available. So I ordered from the company themselves, and they are sustainable, handcrafted. They're providing jobs to the local artisans. So this was all very, very appealing to me. Mm-hmm. And I've used it successly. I actually found cast iron to be hard. I just, I don't know. I like to clean everything very thoroughly, and I ended up over cleaning my cast iron, and it would just rust. So other than being heavy, I have a couple quadruple tendon bypass surgeries that I've had to do on my right hand, so I can't really lift anything very heavy. So this is what, like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Okay, we have 100 subjects that we could talk about. Yes, we better be careful. We got. Yeah, I know. Herbs. Okay, sorry. So chronic inflammation response from mold, and parasitic and Lyme and natural protocols that you have found?
Yes, absolutely. Let's get into it, right? We are looking at other than infection, right? We have infections, we have inflammations. The other things that people out there will recognize that I see in children with mold, Lyme, lingering parasites is hypothyroid, adrenal insufficiency, all the way to adrenal fatigue, frequent urination, excessive thirst, static shocks, delayed or irregular puberty, PCOS, severe PMS, female hormone issues, delayed growth per se, excessive weight gain or difficulty gaining weight, which is less common, low testosterone in our boys on the spectrum going through puberty, and then the mothers have, early and horrendously irregular menopause. So all of these issues are seen, right? Mitochondrial dysfunction, cell membrane instability, the lipid cell membrane. So there are various classification of herbs that I'm able to use, and the first and foremost thing I should mention is the most successful treatment, according to research, has been Dr. Shoemaker's 11-step protocol. And the top step of that protocol is the vasoactive intestinal peptide. And the VIP is a hormone. It is a nasal spray. It seems to work fantastically. It works really well with brain inflammation. It works really well with gut inflammation, provided the previous 10 steps have been completed. And as we know that there are a few pharmaceuticals that are used in the previous steps, right? So we'll just go over the previous steps super quick.
Will link to Dr. Shoemaker's website as well, but continue. Yes, okay. I just wanted to let the listeners know that.
Okay. Remove from ongoing mold exposure, great. Treat with bile acid sequestrant medication, or which is cholestyramine or Welchol. We shall discuss alternatives. There are, different kinds of clays and other binders that can be used with instead of cholestyramine or Welchol, and we have seen the labs coming back negative. So we know that these work, and of course, even more than labs, Karen, as we mentioned, it's the patient symptoms which get better. So we know that the protocol is working.
Right. Right. I have dealt personally with the mold biotoxin issue, and I found that cholestyramine was actually very hard on my digestion. It was very, it just didn't sit well with me. So I'm so glad to know that you have an alternative to that. And we should probably, for the layperson listening, kind of explain what that does and why you would take it, or what the herb that you have and why they need that.
Yes. Toxins have to be mopped up from the gut, especially from the enterohepatic circulation. And cholestyramine and Welchol are bile acid sequestrants, meaning that they act in that enterohepatic circulation section, and they soak up the mold toxins. So that the mold toxins are mycotoxins. That is how they work. And we needed to find, other binders that work in a similar fashion. And we'll talk about it. Next would be eradicating the sinus infections. I have a proprietary, completely herbal spray. The next step is to correct the anti-gliadin antibodies. That is, as we mentioned, just the gluten-free doesn't seem to cut it. We need to go on to SCD or modified SCD. Normalizing the androgen levels, or normalizing the hormones. For the boys who are very advanced, like stage 5 to stage 6 biotoxin illness, along with stage 3 Lyme, it becomes very hard to use just herbs to normalize. So what I find is, number one important is that don't use Dr. Shoemaker cautions against using testosterone cream per se. If you're finding delayed puberty, lack of growth, lack of puberty-related growth, if you know what I mean, right? So testosterone will only feed into the aromatase upregulation cycle, and it gets converted to estrogen. What we want to do, and this is something that I've learned from my wonderful mentor, Dr. Eugene Shippen. Dr. Shippen was also Dr. Shoemaker's teacher, so that shows you the amount of knowledge that Dr. Shippen has. And he advocates the use of HCG shots, and for the growth hormone, the human growth hormone shots. And we can get into detail about this, I guess, another time. Then moving on to the next step would be correcting the antidiuretic hormone and osmolality. I will talk about ERGs, correcting the MMP9 and the VEGF. That step, the step 8 and 9 can both be corrected through diet, through what is called as the low amylose diet, meaning, broadly speaking, you can research this, but broadly speaking, anything that grows under the soil that needs to be avoided for a couple months, and high dose omega-3 that works in bringing the inflammation down and protecting the capillaries. Correcting the C4A, bringing down the TGF beta-1, the inflammatory cytokines respond very well to herbal anti-inflammatories, and I'll be discussing those. Of course, herbal adaptogens work really well as well. Then the final step is the vasoactive intestinal peptide, and that it is what it is. The VIP is a wonderful invention, discovery, whatever you want to call it, and it has been very useful. We are seeing brain MRI changes with VIP. I saw that in my own son. As I mentioned before, we gained 12 IQ points. We are still doing the VIP. The VIP helps to integrate people back into society. One of the most important questions that people ask me is, I am one of the 24 to 26%, or my child is, who is genetically susceptible to mold, to not being able to detoxify mold from my body. So do I always have to stay away? Am I ever going to have a life? Am I ever going to have a social network? What do I do? Am I ever going to be able to leave my house? But that is absolutely possible. You go through the steps, and then at the VIP level, it seems to really help calm the system down. So for periods of time, you're able to go outside, socialize. If you enter a somewhat moldy environment, the VIP seems to keep the system stable, balanced, and calm. Long-term use, I don't have any experience with patients that have been on it for more than a couple of years. So that data is still being collected. Let's go to the integrative approach that I like to use in my practice. Of course, as I said, we need a practitioner that understands everything: tick-borne infection, CIRS, multiple chemical sensitivities, mastocytosis, autism, autonomic dysfunction, even cancer, unfortunately. Gut health, repair, restore. Being able to repair and restore the pathophysiological and biochemical imbalances becomes very important, as that is one of the reasons why mold, biotoxin, and Lyme disease can persist, because everything has been kill, eliminate, but there really has been minimal repair that is done. Methylation is another piece that comes into play. Methylation very carefully. So Shoemaker's protocol, I mentioned the conventional endocrine support. What I use is homeopathy, homotoxicology, Ayurvedic, American herbals, endocrine and pleomorphic remedies. We, of course, support the beneficial microflora. We treat the dysbiosis. We work on improving the immune function. We work on improving the microcirculation. We obviously compensate for dietary, mineral, vitamin, and other deficiencies. We like to offer organ support for tonification of detoxifying organs. You know, your lungs, your lymph system, your liver, your kidneys. Of course, lifestyle detoxification, environmental detoxification. We look at oxidative stress, biochemical stress, bioidentical hormones, homeopathically compounded. We can do that. So this is the reason why I mentioned all of this is so that, you know, one understands that it is a multi-pronged approach. It's not just, you just take, it's not like you take these herbs and you're done.
Right. And the foundation has to be set. I mean, you start working, so I have a program I call the 3 stages. And the first is really setting up that foundation. You've got to, you know, really heal up the gut as best you can, support the system with whatever it's lacking, and be able to just, you know, you're slowly building it up before you kind of start working with the other things that are going on, just so that the body's lymphatic drainage, detoxification, and organ support, all of that, and especially the gut, because it is 80% of the immune system. You know, you work with those things so that the foundation is set. And at least strengthened so that you can move into the other things, because that's further detoxification. And you don't just want to throw your kid into a detoxification protocol when they're already so depleted.
Right, exactly. Multi-stage herbal tinctures. The most common herbs available, herbal tinctures available out there are 1:5 ratio. So not too many people know that multi-stage herbal tinctures with different phytochemical potential. You know, like in homeopathy, you have the 6 eggs, you have the 12 eggs, right? 30 eggs. There is a similar system available with herbs as well. So that is something a skilled herbal practitioner can use at different stages, right? For hormonal, gut, parasitic support. Then there is something that I use called as frequency medicine, where you know, it's not just rife. Rife is one form. It is actual bioenergetic imprinting and inverting essential healing frequencies onto the patient's compounded remedy. Mm-hmm. So that makes that particular remedy. It could be a single herb. It could be a combination remedy that is specially made for the patient. You know, now we have the capability, and this usually comes in the recovery and repair phase, is that based on your individual oral sensory issues, taste and texture issues, we can make powders. We can make tablets, we can make liquids, we can make capsules. There are, we can even make hydrosols. Mm-hmm. And inhalation remedies, we can convert them into essential oils so they can be topically applied. So there are different modes of modes available for our sensitive children to be able to use these highly individualized medicines that are created for them. That is, I have one, maybe two. I'm still working closely with one. Herbal apothecaries. These are old-fashioned apothecaries. I'm able to compound, of course, but it's becoming, you know, as more and more patients are demanding natural, it's becoming hard for me to keep up with everything. So I've had to get myself a support system. The really good news is that all of these various potencies of herbs that I'm speaking about, I will be able to have a multi-stage, multi-step herbal protocol, meaning, you know, mild, medium, strong, glycerides, hydrosols, etc., based on what the clinical picture is. Not everybody has Lyme, co-infections, mold. Some have only Lyme. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, there are various combinations and permutations possible. So for that, I think by August or the very latest by fall, I should be fully equipped and ready to go. This has been something, has been a project really close to my heart. So we have locally sourced organic herb farmers. It's so fantastic, Karen, to know exactly where my cat's claw came from. You know, it came from this farm in this county, and you know, this is the farmer.
Right.
Just,
you know that it's pure
Right.
source, that it's, you know, it's like got the best quality, it hasn't lost anything, it's organic, it doesn't have any bad stuff that's been around it or added to it. Yeah, all of those things are important, because there are a lot of herbs out there and you can get a really poor source and it's not going to do the job for you like a quality source one would of the same thing.
And at the same time save you money, because a quality sourced herb will be definitely not only spiritually, herbally stronger, as in you know, having that herbal plant-based knowledge within its extract. It will also save you a lot of money, because the dosage will be less.
Right. So you'll be able to, when this comes out in the fall, perhaps we could do another show on it if you like, and you could share what you've got, or at least give me the link when that comes out, so that these that, you know, the parents listening know how to get that resource. And we'll also link to Dr. Dashore's website as well, so that you have her contact information, because you've been listening to a lot here, and I know it's a lot of information and to try and help. Dr. Dashore works via Skype with people all over the world, so she is available for that. And I also have a step-by-step program that is in almost 40 countries now as well, and it's online, and I really help set people up with the foundational aspects of moving you right on into the end of these comorbid symptoms that we work with. And then when needed, I'll refer to somebody like Dr. Dashore or other people, because you want to make sure you're working with practitioners who are aware of these pieces and to this level. Because again, you don't want to just be treated with multiple antibiotics over and over for Lyme and parasites that aren't doing the job. And then the mold biotoxin issue must be addressed, or again, it won't work. And you keep thinking, well, if you build the foundation, you've done detoxification, and a lot of people think, well, why isn't my child better? They should be fully recovered by now. No, there's more to it. And some people, I put that near the end of my program because I want to build that foundation at first. But I make sure, look, if you haven't done this yet, you've got to do this. Don't leave that portion out, because it's vital to the optimum results, whatever they may be for your child, because we know that varies for every child too. Everybody's different. So we'll be able to get these resources for these herbs, it sounds like, sometime maybe in the fall of 2018, because people might be listening to this eventually after that date. And then is there anything else that you can share with us now? And I'll link to Dr. Shoemaker's site and the other interview we did on the mold biotoxin, so people can learn more about that as well. Is there anything else that you have to share with us right now too, Dr. Dashore?
Yes, I do. Can I give a few classes of herbs that I use? I mean, broad spectrum herbs that everybody knows that I use will obviously be, right, detoxifying, adaptogenic, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, nervines. Then, so these are the broad classes of herbs that I use. Then there are also nootropic herbs. Nootropic herbs help to nourish the myelin sheath. They are very useful in patients, along with nervine herbs that work on the central nervous system. You speak about laying a foundation, right? So if you give me 5 minutes, I'll give you the classic rundown. The Ayurvedic system, the tri-dosha system, and each dosha has 15 sub-doshas to it you may be aware, that is in an Ayurvedic constitutional type evaluation, right? The Vata, the Pitta, and the Kapha, and they each have subdoshas. That is very useful in my practice with children with autism. That is the ancient Indian Vedic philosophy that is used for digestive fire or lack of digestive fire. It helps to evaluate what are the best constitutionally matched herbs to use for this patient, what are the best herbal combinations. Then about one class of herbs that is used, I mentioned that we need to nourish and restore a tissue and organ and bring balance. Those people can research are called as tropho-restorative herbs. So that is one branch of herbs that I use. Anti-inflammatory, I said, antimicrobial herbs are very widely known. Adaptogenic herbs. Did you know that adaptogenic herbs are famous, right? Because they help to normalize the stress response, the flight or fight response. But adaptogenic herbs are not all made the same. It's important to know the constitution of the child, because some adaptogenics are stimulating, some are calming, some are moistening, some are drying of the internal tissues. So, and there's more. So it is important to find a knowledgeable practitioner. Nervine herbs can again be subclassified as tonics, relaxants, or stimulants. So you have to choose well, because if, for example, a nervine tonic may be able to be combined with an adaptogenic herb that is stimulating, but you obviously cannot combine a nervine stimulant with an adaptogenic stimulant. But not every integrative or holistic practitioner is very well versed. And if you have a practitioner that understands the finer details, it just shortens the treatment time, right? I will discuss some dental herbs with you. Marcons have been implicated in jaw cavitations. So we can, in the fall when we discuss like specific herbs, we'll go more into that. So now detoxification options is FIR sauna. The sauna has to be made from sustainable wood, low EMF. Saunas are fine. Epsom salt baths are great. The clays that absorb mycotoxins. There are various clays. Do your own research. I've gotten some questions back. Oh, don't the clays contain lead? So there is a lot of research and personal decision making involved, and I counsel every patient. So there is the Montmorillonite clay. There is the bentonite, then there's the green clay, there's the French green, there's the Himalayan. And
just to help keep parents confused.
It's not confusion as much as, once you meet your practitioner and practitioner explains, most of the parents really understand well, because it is customization. The goal is, you've already spent so many years trying to deal with autism. Now you don't want to spend another 20 years, dealing with detoxification. So the goal is customization to hasten the recovery. And we don't want to hasten it, I should say, to accelerate the recovery. And then there's also charcoal, pectin, chlorella.
And it's good to mention to rotate some of these. And I teach muscle testing in the program. So like if you have multiple choices of something like a clay, you can test for which one your child's body is most receptive to at that time, because that can also change over time. Even if it's a quality product, you have to make sure that that's right for your child and that that's right for them right now. And it helps to kind of narrow down those aspects as well. And I can even, I'll link to my muscle testing video. So people, if they want to just learn a little bit more about that, they can. But that can be sometimes helpful in helping, again, to narrow down what's right for you, because there are a lot of good choices.
Yes, absolutely. Now, towards the recovery phase, I like to use a healing template. So when we are going into intracellular detox, and healing. Now, this was all about the matrix and the extracellular. You have to eliminate infections, inflammation. Intracellular, what seems to be helping, especially when it comes to the brain cells, right? Advanced cellular homeopathy or plant stem cells. These are obtained from the growth hormone of fresh, new germinating parts of plants. And, there is a lot of success stories that I've seen with plant stem cells. They've been used in Switzerland, in Austria, Germany for a really long time. Another good regenerative therapy is oligotherapy. This is trace element therapy. As we know, trace elements, minerals are often lacking, or they are used up in children on the spectrum for various reasons. You mentioned parasites being one reason. KPU would be another reason. But it's very important to have trace minerals, enzymes, electrolytes all in balance to have a healthy cell, to have a healthy mitochondria. So regenerative trace element therapy or oligotherapy works really well in the physiological and biochemical intracellular repair phase, which comes many months into the initial treatment, right? So that's regeneration. Then I also like to incorporate things like homeopathic tissue cell salts. Those are important. So this is where we can do a homeopathic constitutional evaluation and see which cell salt balances up. And sometimes I'll use the plant stem cells, the regenerative therapies, and the tissue salts. They are tissue cell salts to help with connective tissue regeneration, because a lot of children end up getting connective tissue aches, pains. So I'll use it early or when they're going through a flare. So they're not used as aggressively as during the repair phase, but that is a possibility to use them earlier. One thing that you spoke about was, family constellation, emotional freedom techniques. Those I love. Those work really well. The word I was looking for was biochemical tissue salts, the biochemic tissue salts. There are 12 of them and very helpful. So
for the plant stem cells and the oligotherapies and these things that you're talking about, what are the resources for them, like for people to find either a good practitioner or learn more about them? Where would people go?
Plant stem cell, one of the upcoming, and not upcoming in the US actually, is called as gemotherapy, GEMMO. So if you want to search for a practitioner that specializes in that, that would be helpful. And again, keep in mind, you may need a team at this point, because this, I believe there's only a few practitioners that are practicing Lyme and mold and autism, all natural treatment, and using all of these. And these are relatively new to the autism world. It is.
I had a chiropractor years ago. This was 10 years ago now, at least, with my son, and we did gemotherapy back then. Using Soroil's products, the Soroil Gemo, and we had really very good success with it.
Good.
So yeah, I definitely, I believe I wrote even about that as a journal portion in my book about my experience with it and what I watched change with my son, because we did the neurological one. So there are also different pieces you can do. You can do it for different things in the body.
Exactly. A lot of patients that have done stem cell therapy unsuccessfully or minimally successfully, or are prepping for stem cell therapy, they come to me and they say, let's look at the underlying causes. So the body is kind of ready for stem cells, or I traveled a lot, I spent a lot of money, stem cells wasn't successful. What do? I don't know. I don't want to go back for more until we kind of figure things out. So we make them go through this, and as you mentioned, Plant stem cell therapy can be customized for organ systems. You can definitely customize it for neurological recovery, angiogenesis, expelling the extra metabolites from the neurons, detoxifying the neurons. And often children who go through this, very often, they end up not needing something as expensive as stem cell therapy, or they'll need one. So yes. So I agree that in the hands of a experienced practitioner, many of these natural therapies can be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and especially if you've got the comorbid symptoms of Lyme, parasites, and mold, and people are, if they're just getting treated with antibiotics that aren't helping and are causing more harm ultimately, that you've got to find the right resource that works for you. And it's I'm all about natural, so anytime I can find something natural that works, and is in replacement, because I know the body is a natural biological being. And so if we just get what I knew when my son was diagnosed with his symptoms of autism, I said, well, just, okay, so let's support the body with what it needs. Let's find out what it needs, then support it, build its strength, and get rid of the toxins so they're not invading, and let the body then come back in and take over and do the work. So, and the emotional components, like working with all of these pieces, then the body can just do what it was naturally meant to do, come back. But you got to get all this stuff out of its way first.
Absolutely. Yes. And the thing that you mentioned at the beginning is last year about the herbal workshop that I had, the herbal retreat, if I may.
Yes, absolutely. And then we can wrap up too. This has been a lot. I'm sure parents are a little overwhelmed at this point. So we're going to give you some resources. And Dr. Dashore, yes, please share about this fabulous retreat that's coming up in early August of 2018.
Yes, that is, we are going to start like late on August 2nd, which is just an intro. So if you can be there, that's fine. But the main retreat will start from August 3rd to the 4th to the 5th, and it's going to be a full spectrum herbal workshop. We are going to be looking at everything that I spoke about today. They're actually growing an herb garden over there for us, so we will be doing hands-on. We'll have little clippers, go into the organic garden, choose the herbs you want to work with, bring them back to the meditation hall, and we will make tinctures, concoctions, decoctions. We will make extracts. We can make teas. We can make poultices to pretty much treat about supporting and healing yourself and your family completely naturally. We'll look and we'll have lectures. We have meditations, how to create your spiritual herbal garden. We'll look at the molecular intelligence of medicinal plants. We'll look at how to manage inflammation, pain, coughs, colds, scrapes, bruises, bronchitis, headaches, fevers. Then, it's pretty much, you'll people like you and I, Karen, it's for the people out there, you will find your tribe. And you'll create a good basic foundation. And the workshop is so far people who've signed up is pretty much everybody, parents, caregivers, practitioners who want to learn more, because we'll be discussing herbs to be used for autism, ADD, ADHD, sensory issues, mold, Lyme, in addition to the common cold, etc. that I mentioned earlier. There's also an herb trail where the wild herbs, we're gonna say the wild edibles, the edible flowers, the edible herbs, and those are going to be harvested while we take the walk, and once again bring them back, explore them, eat them, enjoy. You may have all been to wine tasting workshops, right? This is going to be, well, herbal tasting workshop, so to speak, obviously meditation, qigong, yoga practices. It's a retreat, so it's going to be relaxing. We're going to have fun. My website, Karen, is bionexushealth.com, BIONEXUS health.com. And if you go to www.bionexushealth.com/herbal, that's where the information about the workshop is. I have a video that I made when I was at the Art of Living Center in Bangalore, India. Absolutely magical place. The ashram of Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, a very holy, high vibrational place. And I'll just let the people watch the video. It speaks for itself. It's so amazing. All of the knowledge that I gained over there will be available at this Art of Living workshop in North Carolina.
Wow, it sounds amazing. I will definitely link to that. Make sure that everybody knows, how to find that again, so that link will be on the page at the bottom of this video, on the podcast page where it's released at naturallyrecoveringautism.com, so that you can find that. And some of the other resources that we mentioned here, I will link to my step-by-step program, Dr. Shore, all of her information. She can be reached again at her website, and all of her contact information is there, because she does work via Skype at distance. As she mentioned, she's global as well, all over the world. So you don't have to just be in New Jersey to be able to get her help, and to be able to learn more about some of these things. There are some other podcast episodes I will link to, including one with Dr. Richard Deeth, who's a methylation specialist that I just released recently. And I'll link to that, because we talked about methylation a lot too. And I thought some people might not even really know what that means. So if you want some more information, we will link to that too, so that you have the resources that you need. And I know this was a lot of information when Dr. Dashore and I get together. Our minds tend to have, so many things that we want to talk about. As you mentioned, we found our tribe with each other, and we really, I really appreciate you being here and enjoy being around you, and love that you have so much to share, and that you're so open to sharing so many things, and of your time as well, because I know that you're quite busy. So yeah, I will look forward to that retreat. Just sounds amazing. And I hope that a lot of people can get to it as well, because there's a lot to learn, and if they can't, then we can possibly link to some other resources that they could to find some of the information out. But being there and doing something hands-on, as parents have learned, having your own child with autism and working with them and doing your own research sometimes proves to be far more beneficial than trying to talk to somebody who is supposed to be a specialist but really doesn't tend to know that much. Some of the practitioners that we all have seen in the past that maybe weren't the right ones for us. We'll just put it that way. So yeah, it's great to have these resources. Thank you again so much. And we'll look forward to possibly having you back in the future. We have obviously a lot more to talk about, but we only have so much time today.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate the time, and thank you everybody for tuning in.
All right, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Namaste. Take care.